Hello, everyone. My name's Ana Elizarraga. I am a Housing and Economic Development Analyst for the City of Evanston. And we are here today with Philip Devon, Staff Attorney for the Metropolitan Tenants Organization. And this presentation is specifically geared towards students and what to know when moving off campus. This webinar will be recorded and available on YouTube and on the city website. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And we will get to them on a first come, first served. And without further ado, Phil, you can take over.
Thanks, Anna. Appreciate that. Hi, everyone. Philip Devon. Again, I'm a staff attorney at the Metropolitan Tenants Organization, and we're a nonprofit that really is geared and designed to educate renters, empower renters, and organize renters to really improve the conditions in which they live. And that's what we're going to talk mostly about today. A lot of you either are thinking about or may already have moved off campus, and that I know will present a lot of questions and challenges for anyone, but certainly those of you who are doing it for the first time. So what does that mean? Let's see. Get this. If I can figure out how to my screen here. Okay, here we go. The first and foremost thing that we'll be talking about today is what's called Evanston's RLTO, and that stands for the Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance. Evanston's RLTO recently changed. The RLTO, before I go on, is essentially the Tenant's Bill of Rights in Evanston. It lays out all the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants. And this ordinance has been around for decades. In fact, the ordinance in Chicago was designed after the ordinance in Evanston, which came first back in the 80s. The RLTO was updated on January 1st, 2025. Those updates came into effect. And that's what I'm going to focus on talking about today, is what those important updates were, as well as what are the existing rights and responsibilities you have as a tenant. The RLTO was mainly updated just to keep it in line with the new Cook County RLTO, as well as the Chicago RLTO, as well as to enhance some of the protections that tenants need based on what the city was seeing. The first question you may have is, well, does my new apartment apply or is it covered by the RLTO? And of course, the answer is almost always yes. If you're moving off campus, it's likely you're moving into a private apartment building, which means you're going to be covered by the RLTO. Units that are not covered are educational or religious institutions, occupied units by a purchaser if you're buying a unit and you're renting until you own it, or in a frat, a sorority, or a dormitory. So if you're still on campus, the RLTO does not apply, but all of these things that we're going to talk about will apply once you move off campus. A few quick updates. Units in transitional facilities and shelters are not covered by the RLTO. But the important update here is that if your unit, when you move off campus, if your unit's not covered by this law, the landlord must tell you and prominently disclose this in its materials before renting the apartment to you. Another important thing to know, we'll talk about this later, but lockouts, anytime a landlord would remove the locks, change the locks, or otherwise interrupt your tenancy, that's illegal in Evanston and all over Illinois. But those provisions apply to every unit, even in a shared housing facility, even in a shelter, any place that would otherwise be excluded from these protections, the anti-lockout provisions apply. So we know your new apartment is covered by this law. So what are your responsibilities under this law and just as a renter in general? I know when I first rented an apartment, I was an undergrad at Loyola. I had no idea what I needed to be doing, whether that was maintaining things, fixing things, or what was the landlord's responsibility. Uh, so the first thing you should do as a renter, when you are renting, when you're looking, make sure you read your lease. Make sure when you have conversations about an apartment, a lot of you will go out with an agent, you may view an apartment, and the landlord may say, we're going to paint, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that before you move in. If you decide to rent that apartment, make sure you get those things in writing. One thing you're going to hear over and over during this presentation and in these slides is how important documentation is. Documenting what is going on is one of the best ways that renters can protect themselves from bigger problems down the road. So, what are your obligations? Of course, you got to follow the law. You got to abide by building codes. No grills in the house, things like that. You got to use all the fixtures and appliances responsibly and reasonably. And you have to maintain things. You can't let them get fall out of disrepair. If something's actually broken, you need to notify the landlord promptly, and otherwise abide by the rules in your lease. Again, this is an important reminder. This has bitten me in the past. Make sure you read your lease. If you have a cat, if you have a dog, if you do any of these types of things, make sure you read the lease to see if it's prohibited. And if it is, talk to your landlord about that before you sign the lease and before you move in. Because what you don't want to do is be facing problems once you've moved in for breaking a rule. Uh, so generally abide by your lease, be respectful of neighbors and the landlord. Conflict arises, but what I've found in my experience with many years dealing with renters and landlords is that you certainly attract more bees with honey than vinegar. So you want to, try to be civil when you can and deal with conflict, which is almost certainly going to arise at one time or another when you're renting. So what can be included in your lease? This is the first lease you may have ever read over and been required to sign, so it's important to know what can be included. In Evanston, a lease must be in writing, and it also must contain the full names and birth dates of all the occupants in the unit. I know that comes as a surprise to some people, like, what? You need my name and my birthday in this? Yes, it's part of the law. It has to be in writing, and you have to disclose your full names and your birth dates. A couple of things that a lease cannot include is you giving up any of your rights to a jury trial or the right to certain notices, like a 10-day notice for not paying rent. Uh, Leases cannot prevent you from saying something negative, as long as it's true, about your landlord when you live there or when you move out. Again, as long as it's true, you can say whatever it is, even if that thing is negative, and the lease can't include a provision to keep you from doing that. There's a few other things, like the lease cannot require you to pay landlord's attorney's fees, and it can't prohibit any specific breed of dog if otherwise you're allowed to have them. Okay, so that's a few of the basic things. The most important thing to remember is a lease in Evanston has to be in writing. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, okay, I've just moved into an apartment now. This landlord has all of these rules. Can they do this? Can they make this a rule? Can they make that a rule? And landlords do have a wide latitude to create rules that are reasonably designed to protect and promote the safety and health and maintenance of the building. Those rules, however, of course, they have to be in writing. They have to be disclosed to you at the time you enter into the lease. And as I was kind of getting at, they have to be reasonably related to promoting the safety, convenience, and welfare of the tenants in the building. A few updates. Those rules and regulations can't be imposed for the purpose of, preventing tenants from assembling or communicating with one another. Oftentimes, tenants may work together or form a tenants union to kind of improve the conditions of their building. So landlords can't have rules that say are keeping people out of a common area just so that they can't organize or meet together. Those are a few things. Again, the important thing here is to read the lease, because if you're not sure about something in the lease, that's the time to discuss it or bring it up to the landlord and get an explanation. And leases can be changed. Sometimes rules are changed or removed, provisions added, removed. You are free to ask for something to be changed in a lease before you sign it. The worst that can happen is the landlord may say no, and then you'll still be able to make your decision. But I would encourage everyone first to ask questions when you read that lease, and two, uh, ask for what you want. If you want something taken out or put in, ask for it because you certainly will not get anything you don't ever ask for. Uh, Along the same lines, let's talk a little bit about what fees your landlord can charge. I know as a young undergraduate myself, I was constantly shocked by how much a lot of things cost. And for me, it was the first time I had paid a lot of these things. You know, paying rent was not something I had done before I had moved out of a dorm. So it came as a shock to me how much all these things cost, whether that's uh, cleaning, repairing things, you know, changing bulbs or filters. These are things that all come up. As far as fees, again, read your lease carefully. Things may be buried just like anything. Always read the small print. Okay. Um, Before January 1st, there were really no limitations on what a landlord could charge in the lease. And so this is a really important change that it's important to know about. First, late fees. And this is important. You do not have to get this a formula right away. Just know that there is a limitation on late fees. And if you think your lease contains a late fee that's above what's required by law, you should reach out to MTO. We've got a text for helpline that's included in these slides, and we'll have it on a few of those. Encourage folks to reach out if you want a copy of these slides, if you want any of the information here, or you have a question or a problem that comes up. It's a great way to get help. You can text it any time of the day or night, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours. We can talk over the phone, email, text, whatever you prefer. So back to the fees. What can a landlord charge? In Evanston, a landlord can charge a late fee. Generally, leases say that there's a 5-day grace period. But if that's not in the lease, the landlord could start charging a late fee after the first of the month when rent is due. That late fee is capped at $25 for the first $1,600 in rent, and 5% of any amount owed, any amount over that 1,600. So, say for example, if the rent is $2,000 a month, they can charge $25 for that first 1,600, and then they can charge 5% of the amount over 1,600. In this case, with the rent being 2,000, the amount over is 400. So they can charge $25 plus 5% of 400, which is 20, for a total of $45. If your rent is $2,000 and all of a sudden you get a late fee for $100, that should ring some alarms, and you should contact us or look at your lease first and then reach out to the landlord about that. Now landlords charge a lot of move-in fees, you know, all across the country. You will see that landlords are moving away from the traditional security deposit. That's when you would pay usually what's equal to a month's rent. And as long as you didn't damage the place and you paid your rent, you'd get that back when you moved out. That has changed. A lot of landlords now just charge non-refundable move-in fees. Another reason you want to read the lease, make sure you know what fees are refundable or not. That way you're not surprised when you're not getting the $2,000 back. With any fee now in Evanston, however, a landlord has to provide, with any move-in fee, has to provide an itemized list of the costs and fees included. And they can't charge you for things associated with routine maintenance, like cleaning the hallways and things like that, upkeep of the premises. So these are some really important changes. Essentially, landlords cannot only charge move-in fees that are related to the actual cost of you moving in. And that's really a big change that will be helpful to renters. I mentioned security deposits. The rules regarding security deposits have changed a little bit. And a lot of folks still do accept or require tenants to give a security deposit. In Evanston, your landlord can't charge you more than 1.5 times the rent as a security deposit. If they do, you're allowed to basically pay that in installments. They need to hold your security deposit in a federally insured bank account in a bank that's located in Illinois, and they have to keep that separate from their own accounts and their own money. And when you move out, this is the important part, they need to return the deposit within 21 days. If they don't do that, you essentially have the right to sue the landlord. Of course, MTO always wants you to try to avoid that. Nobody wants to end up in court. And usually there's ways, if you contact MTO, certainly, that we can try to help you navigate that without things getting worse. If a landlord does not return your deposit within 21 days, you should write them a letter. Again, back to documentation, that's the most important thing. So as soon as that 21 days is up, you should contact them in writing, cite the law and state that they need to return the deposit. If the landlord is going to withhold something, they need to provide a detailed explanation before that 21 days expires, and then return the remainder if there is any. If this happens to you when you move out of a place and you're not getting your money back and you think you're entitled to it, that would be a great time to use the text for help number or reach out to MTO or the city of Evanston to get a hold of us. Certainly, we can help you navigate that. MTO can provide sample letters for you to create your own notice and send that off to the landlord. If they don't give you your money back, you'd be set up then to be able to go to small claims court and try to get the money back that way. One thing with the new updated RLTO regarding deposits is that landlords can't now just avoid the deposit law by calling things a non-refundable fee. If it's more essentially than $300 or $400, it's a deposit, because now move-in fees have to be reasonably associated with the cost of moving in. So you can't now just rename a security deposit a move-in fee. If you're going to keep a deposit, it's going to be that. You also, let's see, I seem to have lost my slides. Bear with me. I think what I see on here, if the bit that I can, is essentially what I've already covered. If your landlord doesn't give you your deposit back, you need to send them a letter. And if they still don't do that, contact us so we could give you some referrals to attorneys or pro se resources to help you pursue that in court. But again, and this is a tip, especially for folks that are moving into an apartment for the first time, the way you often avoid having a security deposit issue is, of course, abide by the lease. Don't destroy the place. Don't tear things up. And if you do, fix it or tell the landlord and fess up to it before you move out. Also, take pictures. Document everything when you move into an apartment. Take pictures so that you know exactly what was or wasn't broken, because you may be surprised and feel like you're getting nickeled and dimed when you move out and you get all these pictures saying there's a hole here, there's the nick here. So make sure you document what was there when you moved in. That way there's no surprises or he said, she said when you move out. And of course, take pictures when you move out as well. Let's see. When you're signing a lease, there is some information that your landlords are required to disclose. Before January 1st, essentially the landlord was required to disclose their name, contact information, and if ownership changes, the successor owner's name, address, and telephone number. Sometimes it is difficult. Some folks, if it's not in their lease, they suddenly don't know how to contact their landlord. Reach out to us. We can help try to figure out who you should be contacting. But again, read your lease before you sign it. That way, things that are missing or unclear, you'll have. If there's no contact information for the person you're renting from, that should be a red flag, and you should make sure to ask about that. Make sure to get names, telephone numbers, emails. As far as disclosures under the new updated law, there's some very helpful ones. landlords in Evanston now are required to tell you up front who pays the utilities, whether it's you or the landlord, and what the costs were for the previous 12 months. They need to furnish that information. They also need to tell you about any building code violations in the last year, any threats by the city or a utility company to cut off service, any known lead hazards or foreclosures that could be pending. And lastly, they have to tell you how to detect, report, and remediate bed bugs. These are all important things. And also, again, it's like I'm a broken record, but this is why it's important to read the lease in detail, because often leases have information that is really helpful to the tenant, or something that could be a red flag to the tenant. And if there's a lead hazard, you certainly want to know about that. So make sure you read the fine print and go through every last page. Leases now could be 60 plus pages, but make sure you do it. If you're a student at Northwestern, you've certainly got the ability to get it through your lease. So let's move on. Those are a few of the things, the big things that landlords have to disclose in a lease. Obligations. I think everyone knows the main things. The landlord obviously is responsible for maintaining your unit. They have to keep it up to code. And if the tenant is ever to be responsible for any kind of upkeep or maintenance, that has to be in a separate written agreement that would compensate the tenant for that. So just remember, if the landlord says, hey, if you shovel, I'll give you a discount on rent, that needs to be in a separate written agreement. They also have to address criminal activity. And if required in the lease, the landlord has to supply essential services. Essential services are gas, heat, hot water. Of course, those facilities need to be available. They always have to supply those, but they don't always have to pay for those. And now a new update, but they do have to disclose who pays for those. So remember, your apartment should have adequate heat, hot water, electricity, gas, and now if the lease includes air conditioning or internet, that is also deemed an essential service, which must be supplied without interruption. And we will talk about in a moment what you should do if a landlord isn't meeting their obligations under your lease. And one of the first things that you're going to probably ask yourself is, well, what do I do if my landlord isn't fixing something? And I know I've fixed things in an apartment when I was a bit younger, and later on thought, oh, darn, I could have, either made the landlord do that, or I at least could have charged the landlord for what I did. And this is a great example of one of your rights under the RLTO, and that's your right to repair and deduct. Under Evanston law, if your landlord is not maintaining the unit or there's a building code violation in your apartment, and you give the landlord a notice in writing that gives them 10 days to fix the problem, and they do not fix the problem within 10 days, you can either do the work yourself or have the work done by a professional and provide the receipt and bill to the landlord when you deduct that cost from the next month's rent. There are some updates and caveats. So before you just go out and upgrade the whole apartment and then charge it to the landlord, remember, one, you have to write a letter first. It has to give them 10 days to fix the violation. And only after those 10 days, if they've failed to do it, then you can have it fixed and reduce that amount from the rent. The limitation is that you cannot spend more than $500 or half of the month's rent, whichever is greater. And the landlord, again, has 10 days to fix the problems as opposed to 14 under the old law. There's another option. If the landlord's not making repairs and those repairs are too hard to fix yourself or too expensive, a repair and deduct where you do this yourself or hire someone to do it, that's appropriate for a lot of common things. Maybe the cabinet door has fallen off, or the fridge handle needs to be replaced, or the window unit air conditioner needs to be installed. These are things that could all be done relatively cheaply by someone or a handyman. Bigger issues that would cost more than $500 or would require a lot more work to fix, could be an option for rent withholding. And that doesn't mean withhold all the rent. That means a limited amount that would reflect how much the problem is reducing the value of your unit. So it is a little complicated, but in order to withhold rent in Evanston, you first, of course, need to have a repair that the landlord hasn't made. You need to notify them in writing. And before you do that, that problem needs to have been cited as a code violation by the city. So this is the big one. In Evanston, you cannot reduce or withhold your rent if the city has not cited that problem as a code violation. Only after the city has cited that as a code violation can you give the 10-day notice saying, hey, if you don't fix this in 10 days, I'm going to reduce my rent by a portion that reflects the reduced value of the unit due to that code violation. Again, same as before, they have 10 days to make the repairs. If they don't, then you can do the reduced rent that you stated in your letter. Before you ever get to reducing rent or fixing things yourself, I would suggest you reach out to MTO. Talk to one of our counselors, talk to me, talk to whoever's there about how to protect yourself going forward. Make sure your landlord doesn't retaliate, and just make sure that you follow the law and the proper steps to make sure things are done right. Again, one way to do that is document everything. Put things in writing. If you talk to a landlord or his agent, write that down when you're done talking. Send an email and write notes and say, hey, I'm just following up on our conversation. Here's what we discussed, and send that off. That's a great way to document and help protect yourself moving forward. Another big thing that comes up, I know people have had landlords storm into their apartment or come banging on the door demanding entry. So I want to address when a landlord could actually enter your apartment. And it's pretty simple. In Evanston, a landlord has to give 48 hours notice, 2 days notice. In some means that's designed in a good faith way to provide notice. So they can't, send it up in smoke signals. They need to call you, write you, email you if they know that you look at these emails. And they can't enter without your consent unless there's an emergency. A few updates to the law, it's clarified that showing your unit to prospective renters within 90 days of your lease terminating is a valid reason. Necessary maintenance, fixing things that are damaged. But cosmetic upgrades are not a reason to enter. That'd be something you'd have to choose to allow while you live there. They can come in without your consent if there's an emergency, a flood, a fire, or some other, emergency. And if they do that, they need to leave a note and explain why and when they came in. Sometimes you may run into this happening. Again, the best thing you can do immediately is document it, write a letter. And again, like with everything else, call MTO, use the Evanston Text for Helpline, and you'll be able to get some help writing that letter promptly with the legal language that you want to be included. So that's a little bit about when they can come into your unit. Now let's talk about a little bit. We won't talk about this too much, but what happens if you can't pay the rent? Well, the first thing that you should do if you know that you're not going to be able to pay the rent is talk to your landlord. Communicate, communicate, communicate. It is oftentimes the best way to help tenants avoid an eviction or avoid a worse situation, and it certainly will buy you time. If you can't pay rent on time, you're going to get a 10-day notice, and you've got 10 days to pay all the rent you owe, or the landlord can file an eviction. There have been a few changes. All tenants in RLTO units are entitled to 10 days notice. There's no more exception for owner-occupied 2 flats. And if your landlord chooses to accept the rent due after that notice that has expired, the notice is waived and your tenancy is completely reinstated back to the way it was. And then also, this is important, 1 time per tenancy you can pay the rent due plus all the legal costs to the landlord after that, and they must reinstate the tenancy and dismiss any eviction case. But again, if you are even worried that you might get behind on rent, call us, use the text for help number that's going to be at the end of these slides, and we can brainstorm ways for you to communicate with the landlord and avoid ever having to worry about going to eviction court. If you think you're going to be in that situation, reach out to us. We'll help you navigate that, make sure that you don't end up there. Let's see, this is just a little bit more about rule violations. We talked about what happens if you can't pay your rent. And the same is going to really apply if you violate a rule of the lease. Except not a 10-day notice, you're going to receive a 30-day notice. Similarly to non-payment of rent, where you have 10 days to pay that rent due, you've got now 30 days to fix or cease breaking whatever rule that is. For example, some people have gotten a dog in their unit and they don't have permission to have a dog. The landlord will give you a 30-day notice, and then you'll essentially have 30 days to get the dog out of there, or the landlord could take you to eviction court. Again, this is something you do not want to deal with. If this is something that comes up, reach out to us, use the text for helpline, and you can talk to us about ways to, communicate with the landlord and solutions that can avoid ever having a big blow up. We don't want to end up in court. We don't want problems with our landlords. And oftentimes, as I've said over and over, communication is definitely the best way to avoid those problems. When you get toward the end of a lease, I know I moved a couple of times during undergrad. I moved junior, senior year, moved to 2 apartments and then moved quickly thereafter graduation. So just remember, a landlord, if they're not going to renew your lease, they have to notify you in writing. And if they do want to renew, they have to offer you the proposed lease before the end of your current lease. Now, let's talk about the big changes that everyone should know about that came into effect on January 1st. And that is, number one, the most important, you are entitled to 90 days written notice if your lease is not going to be renewed. So if your lease is up, on April 1st, you have to be notified in January, 3 months prior to April 1st, that your lease is not going to be renewed. They also have to give you a proposed new lease if they're going to renew it at least 90 days before the end of the lease. So again, if they're not going to renew your lease, they have to tell you 3 months in advance. And if they are going to renew your lease, they have to give you that proposed lease 3 months in advance. Once you get that lease, you've got 45 days to make a decision. So they cannot force you to make a decision within, more than 45 days before your lease expires. So those are really some good protections. Before there was no time limit. So a landlord can tell you 30 days in advance, that was that. And they could say, make a decision today, or I'm not going to renew. That's no longer the case. They have to give you 3 months, and then you don't have to make a decision until 45 days before the end of the tenancy. Unlawful retaliation. What is it? Well, retaliation is when a landlord may take some action out of spite or revenge, or retaliate against you for doing something like exercising your rights, calling the building department and requesting an inspection, or citing a code violation. These are things that could trigger retaliation. It's always been against the law to retaliate against a tenant. But in Evanston, there are a few additions to that. Now that it is illegal to retaliate against any renter if they've complained of a code violation, or complained to a community organization like MTO, or to the news media. If they've used the common spaces to organize or distribute leaflets, these are all protected activities now that a landlord cannot retaliate. And retaliation could mean a lot of things. It could mean not renewing your lease. It could mean taking away things that were previously available, like a parking spot or, use of the backyard and the grills. These are ways that a landlord might retaliate. And the way you can protect yourself against retaliation is documenting. Make sure you document if you exercise your rights or you request a repair, if you contact MTO. These are things you want to make sure you keep in writing, document. That way, if suddenly now, after you've requested a repair, your lease gets terminated, you'll have proof of that retaliation. And then you can reach out to MTO. You can use the text for helpline, and you can find out what steps next to take. I talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the presentation. Unlawful lockouts, anytime a landlord, changes, removes, adds locks, blocks an entrance, removes your window, or otherwise interferes with your tenancy by cutting off the heat, the gas, the plumbing, whatever, or comes and removes your property, that is an illegal lockout. That's illegal in Evanston. It's illegal in Chicago. It's illegal in all of Illinois. But what has changed and what is a little bit different in Evanston specifically is now cutting off your internet is also considered a lockout, as well as removing or incapacitating appliances or fixtures. If they came in and took the oven away, that will now be considered a lockout as well. And again, if you recall, lockouts are illegal against any renter in Evanston. It does not matter if the RLTO applies or not. This provision applies to everyone, no matter where they live. So if this happens, you should call the police right away, and you should also call MTO, and we can help you kind of navigate what to do when you run into that situation. Again, these are just going to run through a few best practices for you as you move off campus and you rent. The most important one is documentation. Just remember to keep all your communications with your landlord in writing. Try to do email and text, and certainly document all repair requests. I know a lot of people, myself, like to handle business and get things done over the phone because it's quicker and you can get answers. And some landlords will do that as well. Make sure you just follow up with an email or text. If you're worried or think that you need to document something, the answer is yes, you need to document it. And the way you can do that is follow up on the phone call in writing. Again, whether you need to contact the landlord as soon as you can if there's an issue. If you think you're not going to be able to pay rent, if there's an issue with the neighbor, if there's a problem with the lease, reach out to the landlord in writing. The sooner, the better. And then tell them exactly what you want them to do. Don't leave it up to them to offer solutions. This is advice I wish I knew when I first started renting, because I would say, oh, hey, this is broken. Can you come fix it? But what would have helped is if I said, you need to come fix this by doing XYZ. Because oftentimes you'll have a problem and the landlord may come out or send somebody that does a shoddy job or replaces the appliance or the sink with something worse or that wasn't sufficient. So again, tell them exactly what you want them to do. Oftentimes they'll do it. Just don't leave it up to them, because they're probably not going to come up with the solution you're looking for. And again, won't get anything you don't ask for. So you want to, put that ball in their court. Of course, too, along the lines of documentation, take photos. We've all got cell phones. They're all really, high quality. You can get every last nook and cranny, every little nick and scratch in 4K, and there will be no he said, she said. When you move out, you'll get your deposit back, and you won't have to fight or call MTO to find out what to do next. Also, this is good advice. Avoid cash payments without receipts. It's fine to pay in cash as long as you're getting a receipt from the landlord. And if they're not, and you're in this situation, write your own receipts if you have to. And of course, with all documentation, keep a copy for yourself. Write it, print it, you save it somewhere on your computer, an apartment file. Every apartment I've lived in, I had a folder in my Gmail where I kept all information, anything related to that apartment, I kept there. and for a long time, even after I moved out, until I felt it was okay to get rid of. So document, 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 read the fine print, read your lease, and don't leave things up in the air. Offer solutions and demand those from the landlord in writing, and that is going to just set you up for success. Um, and I'm going to talk about a few things before we close that are available to renters, and particularly students. Uh, all renters, but particularly for you students, some of these resources are going to be really important. Of course, here we've got a summary of the law that we've been discussing, a link to the actual law, and an Evanston model lease agreement. That's a really helpful document to look over, because you'll see what a model lease looks like. That was updated recently. MTO thinks that's a great lease document to use. And so if you're looking at a lease and you're thinking about renting an apartment, it'd be great to kind of compare that with the model lease agreement on the Evanston City's website, to kind of gauge whether there's something you should be looking at, or if you should be looking for a different place. Uh, Really important. I've mentioned this several times this evening. The Evanston Text for Helpline is a great resource. If you text 205-736-0293 24/7, you can text that number. It's going to ask you a few questions like, do you live in Evanston? Do you want us to contact you by phone or email or text? And once you get through that, you're going to get a person from MTO. It may be me, it may be another hotline counselor. You're going to get someone that knows what they're talking about, and they're going to be able to answer any of these questions, and help get you a sample letter for repairs or your deposit, or just brainstorm ways to approach the landlord about some situation that's arisen. That's a great resource. The Evanston Text for Helpline, save it in your phone. And if you're renting a couple years down the road from now, you'll have that and you'll know exactly who to reach out to, when a problem arises. Uh, and then lastly, a couple of other helpful resources is the Northwestern's Office of Student Affairs, for off-campus life. They are great. And if you go into that office, you can get all sorts of information about finding roommates, finding apartments, subletting. These are things that when we come into Northwestern and talk at the off-campus housing fairs, several times a year, these are things that folks are dealing with a lot, trying to find a replacement for a roommate. All these things, go to the off-campus life, Office of Student Affairs for off-campus life, and I guarantee they're going to be helpful to you. And then also just be aware that the undergraduate financial aid office can help folks obtain letters, showing and documenting what aid you're receiving, which can really be helpful when you're renting your first apartment and need to prove that you have the ability to pay the rent. If you don't have all the co-signers you need or something else, this could be a really helpful way, for you to show the ability to pay and make sure you get that first apartment or new apartment that you want. Again, the Evanston Text for Helpline is there, 205-736-0293. Great way to get answers to simple questions or complex questions. Just shoot us a text and we're going to resolve it for you. And that is, the quickest and easiest way. You don't need to memorize the law. All you need to remember is that you got to read everything. You got to document everything. And if a problem arises, don't wait to deal with it. I know we want to put stuff off, and it's a drag to deal with apartment problems. But the best way to deal with them is head on right away. The sooner the better, and the more documentation, the better. You're going to protect yourself down the road. And lastly, we've got walk-in hours that we do, on basically a monthly basis at the Evanston Public Library. The next session is November 19th, next week. And then we have another session December 10th. Those are both from 4 to 7 p.m. If you just email evanston@tenants-rights.org, you can register. If you don't do that, no big deal. Just come into the library November 19th or December 10th. We'll help you out. We'll answer any questions or follow-ups you may have. And again, if it's down the road, just use the Evanston Text for Helpline. The best thing you can do is get informed and get involved. And that's the way you'll get out ahead of problems and resolve them before they become bigger problems. Appreciate everyone's attention. We'll be able to get anyone, if you have a question or a follow-up, you can put it in this chat, and we'll make sure to answer that and get back to you. Otherwise, good luck and happy apartment hunting.
Thank you very much, Phil. Are there any questions? Please feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay, it seems like there are none. So this will be recorded, and you do have all these wonderful resources like the Evanston Text for Help. So if you have any questions, feel free to text 205-736-0293. Thank you again, Phil, for being here tonight with us, and hope everyone has a wonderful end of your fall semester. Good luck.
Thanks.